الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our 13th session where we are reading and reflecting on the work of the great Ottoman scholar Said Nursi from his treatise titled A Message for the Sick or A Message for the Ill. Over the past sessions now, we have been analyzing and reflecting on the various spiritual counsels and advices that he provides in this text, particularly for those individuals who are afflicted with disease and who are trying to understand the spiritual benefits which are laden within the afflictions that they are experiencing. So inshallah today we'll be focusing on the 11th remedy, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to continue reading from this beneficial work, and that above and beyond everything we are able to imbibe the various counsels that Said Nursi provides, because it's not just about reading something for the sake of reading or for the sake of preserving theoretical statements or information or data. Rather, it's how we take the information or the statements and the authorship of the author and how we implement that on a practical level. That's the purpose of knowledge. Knowledge is supposed to be imbibed and implemented. It's not an end in itself. That's why if you look at the word ilm, which means knowledge, and if you switch the letters mim and lam, or lam and mim, and you turn them around, the word that you now come out with is amal, and that shows us that there's a relationship between ilm and amal, such that knowledge is supposed to be practiced upon. And it seems that in our current day and age that many of us we tend to prioritize, or we tend to place a high premium on attaining knowledge, but not necessarily the enactment of what we have learned. So inshallah we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are able to implement and imbibe whatever we have learned, because whatever we have learned and whatever we have studied, we will be questioned upon that. It will either be for us or against us on the day of reckoning. And so it's important that whatever beneficial knowledge that we have acquired over the years, that we are able to truly bring about a transformation within our lives from that beneficial knowledge. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, to make us of those who are able to do so. One of the things that I wanted to mention with regards to the month of Ramadan is that it is a prime opportunity for us to really improve our characters and those internal aspects of our human personality. What is interesting is that prior to the month of Ramadan, when the international lockdown started and many of us were forced to remain in our homes, the activities that started to take place were things that we did not necessarily get a chance to do previously prior to the lockdown, due to the hustle and bustle or the business of our lives, and many of us started focusing, on painting our houses or fixing some external issue related to our homes, and so many of us were focused on those tasks which were related to the external aspects of our assets or our property, things that we did not necessarily get a chance to do in the past. And whilst that's fine, we were able to prioritize those important things. We should not forget the importance of prioritizing the fixing and the purification and the embellishing of our human character, because ultimately that's the most important thing that we possess, and that's within our ambit of control, that we are able to beautify our character. Many a times other things within our lives are not within our control. There's so many variables that dictate the events in all our lives, and all we can do sometimes is just to respond in the best way. But one of the things that we do have, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed within our control or within our will, and obviously it is contingent on His will and power, is how we beautify or how we improve our character. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith, and this is really one of the most profound hadiths that I've come across, where he says, "Min husni al-Islam al-mar'i tarakahu ma la ya'nihi," that from the beauty of one's religion, or from the beauty of one's Islam, is that he or she leaves those things which does not concern him. And I think in our current time, if we are able to refrain or stay away from those things which have no real benefit to ourselves, we will be able to improve our personalities. So there's two components here. There's a component of commission, where we have to act and make that active effort to improve our personalities, and then there's also an act of omission, whereby we refrain, or we omit ourselves from being involved in certain activities, or focused on things which will ultimately have no benefit for ourselves. What's interesting is that Ibn Ata'illah, when he looked at this hadith, he said that one of the reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala contracts or restricts His rizq, provision for His creation, is when individuals are involved in matters which do not concern them. And I think that's very important for us to take note of, because in the world in which we live in, this globalized, integrated world, where most of us, if not all of us, all participate on various social media platforms, we are exposed to the lives of each other, and many a times being exposed to the events, the lives, and the milestones, and the achievements and the activities of others, that somewhat causes us to become obsessed or focused with things that have no benefit for ourselves, and that goes into contradiction to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that I just mentioned. And the danger is that when we start focusing and preoccupying ourselves with what other people are doing, right, it usually has a negative effect upon ourselves, because when you see perhaps a certain perspective of the life of someone, and many a times, sadly enough, but I think we need to be honest to admit this, that we like to advertise or expose a certain angle of our lives, which in reality does not show the true reflection, and so we tend to show what we assume to be the best aspects of our lives, and in turn that really affects people on the other end of the social media platforms, because just think about it, a constant influx or bombardment of so many people's lives can cause people to go into a state of despair. People start questioning their lives, they start questioning what they have achieved or their milestones, and many a times what they are exposed to is not really true, and so therefore they go into these states because of something which is not true. So whilst everyone is responsible for how they respond and they need to make an active effort to not allow spiritual diseases such as hasad, envy, and so forth to grow within them. The reality is that we are all responsible as well in terms of what we put out there. So it's important for us to be moderate, and rather to abstain and refrain from posting or exposing certain elements of our lives where we know it might to a certain degree affect people in a negative way. We should take the prerogative in preventing other people from feeling bad or for going into a potential state of despair due to our actions and so forth. So we all have a role to play in this, and as I mentioned, it's one of those important things that we need to get right, particularly in the modern world, because when we analyze this world in which we live in, we see that it is characterized solely by materialistic endeavor, such that everyone is in a state of competition with each other, because we've all come to this notion that we have individual lives that have no effect upon each other, or that should not take into account the lives of others. This notion of liberty and of individuality, which to a degree is important, without a doubt, but at the same time we need to understand how we impact each other. And because all of us are in this constant state of materialistic endeavor, and we're in a state of materialistic competition, we define our success by the failures of others, and that is very, very, very detrimental to the welfare of our society. But as I mentioned, this is the ethos of the individual in the modern age. What's interesting is that in the African cultures, particularly in the South African culture, is this notion of Ubuntu, which for the paucity of the English language, the best that I can probably translate it to is the concept of togetherness, where I am because we are. And I think this is a very interesting and a very healthy concept to take into account. Ibn Khaldun spoke about asabiya, social solidarity, where to a certain degree it is very healthy, where we take into account the well-being of our society, where we understand that we all have a role to play, and that we are reciprocally affected, in the sense that what we do affects society, and the effects of society have a direct effect upon us as well. So there's a reciprocal relationship between the individual and society. And I think when we embrace these type of concepts of Ubuntu, togetherness, and social solidarity, we are able to put things in perspective, and we are able to balance our responsibilities with each other, such that we are looking at the welfare of our societies. Because when we go into a mode of pure competition and personal benefit, whilst we might benefit, or our small circles might benefit, in the bigger picture, society doesn't benefit. And when society doesn't benefit, and society is affected in a detrimental way, that will come back to affect us at some point. So we need to take all these things into account. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this blessed month of Ramadan that we are able to focus on those things which concern us and understand the implications of our actions. To focus on the 11th remedy, and I'll just briefly summarize this, inshallah we won't go into too much detail today. Said Nursi says, "O one who is afflicted with disease, show patience for the present. Remember that in the past, when you were afflicted with other diseases, that those diseases had to end. There was a time when it terminated, and at that termination, you went into a state of happiness and into a state of joy, because obviously the disease ended, and you also realized that there was great spiritual benefits that you attained through showing patience with those previous diseases. And so like now, when you are afflicted with another disease, you can make an inference from that this disease will have to end at some point. It might not be now, but perhaps it could be tomorrow or the day after, and so forth. And when that time comes, you will go into a state of joy, into a state of happiness, because you will be in a state of relief. And similarly, the patients that you showed during this current illness will convert and transform into rewards that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place on your account. And additionally, he says that this fear of the unknown, that you as an individual, when you construct these potential scenarios of the future, what you do to yourself is that you increase in your own psychological suffering. And so he advises not to play any emphasis on those things which do not exist, because when you think about the future and you construct these various permutations, the reality is that they do not exist. And so therefore, if they do not exist, there's no point in placing any emphasis or preoccupation on those things which are ma'adum, that have no existence. And so the important thing is that you focus on the moment. And yes, in the moment there might be pain, there might be grief, but as you recognize from the past that with these difficulties you will increase in your station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you, and He will take that grief and pain that you are experiencing and transform them into rewards that will be recorded for you. So what Said Nursi is trying to emphasize in this point is to focus on the moment. Do not become a victim to the past, and do not become a victim to the future. The past is there to learn from, and particularly when it comes to diseases that you have faced in the past, you have come to a realization that it has to end at some point, and that brings about relief to you. And the fact is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for your patience with the disease. And so the past now becomes a template for you to focus on the present. And the future in itself is something which has not yet occurred. So there's no point in rationalizing and creating all these various hypotheses with regards to where your life could lead, and the potential of your suffering increasing. There's no guarantee that that will occur. And I think it's an important point that he makes with regards to us not over rationalizing our illness and our suffering and our difficulty. Now, if you look at Dostoevsky's novel Notes from the Underground, I think that is an excellent example from literature, where the protagonist, who has no identity in the actual novel, right, he over rationalizes his situation and his illness that he has acquired. And because he has over rationalized his situation and circumstances, he goes into a state of paralysis. He's not able to respond to his situation in the most appropriate of ways. And what's worse is that the way that he interacts with other people, he becomes very sadistic, he becomes very perverted, very callous in his relationships with others, because he's not able to truly understand the situation that he is in. And all of this is because he over rationalized his situation. And as we mentioned yesterday and in previous sessions, that the mind and the intellect are gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us, but they have their value and they have their limitations. And when we do not use these gifts appropriately, right, when we use these gifts against ourselves, for example, by thinking and by hypothesizing and by imagining potential outcomes which have no basis in reality, we end up causing more trauma and more psychological injury to ourselves. And this is because we've used these gifts against ourselves and we're not able to use them in the most appropriate of ways. So it's important for us to recognize that when we are suffering from an illness, that we should be in a state of patience, and that we should take every moment as it comes and try to respond to that moment with patience and with certitude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not letting our sacrifices and our sufferings go to waste. You know, the best consolement that we can take out of this is from the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إنما يوفى الصابرون أجرهم بغير حساب. That those who are patient, Allah will give their reward without any reckoning. And if we really think about this, if we really ponder about this, I don't think there's anything more consoling than that if we are of the patient, if we are able to endure the difficulties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon us, which in reality has benefits for us, our reward in this life, and more importantly in the year after, will come without any reckoning. And you know, when we read the accounts of the year after, and we all have to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take account of ourselves, if there's a possibility or potential whereby we will be able to bypass that, then we should try our utmost to take those opportunities. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying in the Quran, if you are patient, your reward in the year after will come without any reckoning. And I don't think there's anything better or more sweeter than that. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are patient in all our affairs, and that He grants us the best in this life and in the year after. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.